if you force the cancer cells to stop dividing, they'll actually, I mean, this gets a little technical with light and stuff, but they may actually metastasize looking for sources of light, either biophotons that your own body makes or light on the surface in your skin.
Well, they evolved to survive. I mean, we see that.
So they'll leave.
Yeah.
They'll leave the area. They'll go somewhere else where there are more signals for dividing present for them. So light is one of those signals that triggers any cell in your body to divide. So anyway, the point is that they go to highly metabolic tissues that are creating biophotons, and that UV light that they secrete triggers the cancer cells to divide again. So you have, even if you give ivermectin, fenbendazole, or chemotherapy or whatever, a lot of these drugs prevent the cancer cell from dividing the way it wants to, right? It's trying to divide. That's the thing it's doing above all else, right? It's like rapidly trying to divide in order to survive. It feels as though it's under so much stress that it's about to die. It must divide as quickly as possible. This is essentially what cancer feels like, if you want to, think of cancer as like feeling something. And so that's one approach. And sometimes it works. Sometimes you do it enough, you do it fast enough and, strongly enough that you do kill off all the cancer cells, then you're left with the toxicity. The other approach is you remove the toxicity gradually and you support the body with everything it needs. And then the cancer cells actually turn back into normal cells. This actually happens, right? This is what a lot of people who have like spontaneous remissions, it's not that your immune system killed all the cancer. It's that the cancer cells stopped being under so much stress that they were being, basically triggered to divide out of control. The stress was gone and they just went back to normal. They actually turned back into normal cells. And we know this can happen. I mean, I'm reading a book now, Cross Currents by Robert O. Becker, where he shows that there was a study where when you kind of reverse the polarity in terms of DC current, where a cancer cell was, the cancer cells could be, reconverted into like stem cells essentially, and then they turned into normal tissue cells. So we know it can happen, and it's the safer approach.
I'd love to
see that study. Look it up, the Robert O. Becker stuff. And, just reading that, I mean, he said, like, I don't think anyone picked up that research and like applied it to cancer, which obviously they should have. But there may be a really, really simple way to turn off cancer cells just by applying super, super weak electricity. Like, it's not high voltage. It's extremely tiny voltages of DC current. And it basically just tells cancer cells to go back to being normal cells. I mean, it's just really incredible. And you looking at that, you're like, there's so much research that should have been done. We probably would have had multiple cures for cancer by now if we hadn't had Fauci, dispensing the billions of dollars to his friends in industry for the last 30 years.
Well, but that's it, right? So, I mean, I can tell you, and this does not take a doctor. This takes a lawyer, right? I've looked, I've watched, I've seen how this is done. And if you study the way that the law works and the way that the money is handed out and the where it's used and what it's being used for, it is always, always, always universally about developing treatments, not cures. They don't study the causation. They don't want to know what causes cancer. There's some random stuff out there that's kind of, hey, does this particular chemical cause cancer? But there's no general study of causation. There's no general study of, what's behind the increase. In fact, they avoid those studies like the plague, because those studies would absolutely show that the FDA and they're generally approved are generally regarded as safe chemicals, the process this, the process that, the environmental toxins, these things all contribute to cancer. There's no question about that. Now, the unfortunate reality for someone that has cancer is that there is a time clock ticking, depending on how aggressive the cancer is. And, you have to address that. Now, if you've got something that's, if over time through the millions of people that get cancer, we were able to study this properly, we could probably have distributed the risk of studying this. And this is an ethics issue, right? For a lawyer, we look at this as an ethics issue. For a doctor, you look at the same. So when we study cancer, the problem with studying cancer is you're experimenting on someone who can die. And there's a time clock. And the longer that clock moves without some sort of an intervention that we know is going to be impactful, the closer that person moves to death. And so there's an ethics issue, right? How much can you test before it's time to just use what you know works? Now, what we know works at this point, it works sort of. We look at our chemos, we look at our antigen treatments, we look at these things, and we see an efficacy in them. My wife, of course, stage 4 cancer. She has she's had a very aggressive form of breast cancer. We worked through a lot of the alternatives, but the problem that I found on the alternative side is that the science behind it is poor or non-existent. And that's intentional. Fauci doesn't want to look and understand. Alternative, as I define it, does not mean exclusively vitamin D. It means anything that is not mainstream pharmaceutical. And that could be anything. I've talked to people who have expertise in everything from energy fields to vitamins to herbs to repurposed mainstream drugs. I've talked to everybody on the planet. So, by the way, before someone sends me a text that says, "Hey, is your wife taking Fen-Ben?" Yes, I'm aware of Fen-Ben. And yes, we've tried Fen-Ben. And no, Fen-Ben did not work for us. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means it didn't work for us as we tried it. But I would ask you before you send me the message about Fen-Ben, what dosage should a 45-year-old female with no prior diagnoses of cancer and generally healthy with the following conditions, what dosage should she be taking, and what other medicines should she be taking? Because anything you put in your body is dependent on everything else that's in your body. So does vitamin this impact Fen-Ben that? And this is the problem, right? Everybody looks at this very simplistically, like, well, all you got to do is take ivermectin, it'll cure your cancer. Nope, no, it won't. We took ivermectin, it didn't cure her cancer. That's not to say ivermectin doesn't work or that there's not an ivermectin protocol that does work. Of course, there probably is. But does it work on all cancers or just certain types? What's the dosage? When do you use it? At what point does that intervention work? Does it work for, a 140-pound female or a 250-pound male? What about the specifics? And the devil is in the details. And for anybody that thinks they've got all the answers, I've got news for you. You don't, because they don't exist. We've looked. So I'm interested in your reaction to that. Before I do, please go to www.tomrenz.com, www.tomrenz.com. Check out our shop. Please donate. Check out our affiliates, including bh-pm.com. There are gold guys. You need to have gold and silver in your portfolio. If you don't, you're going to be in trouble. The dollar is going to collapse, in my opinion. So please check out bh-pm.com. Tell them Renz sent you. And also, please donate to our GiveSendGo/RenzLaw, GiveSendGo/RenzLaw. We need your donations. They keep us fighting. And last, but certainly not least, and most importantly for this show, you're listening to Dr. Hader. My go-to doc is Dr. Hader. He developed this. He put it together. I mean, I got a lot of faith in this guy. He is a good doctor. I don't recommend a ton of doctors. This is one that I do. Go to mygotodoc.com. He can get you your prescriptions. He can look at, natural. He can look at alternative. He can look at whatever you need. This is a guy that you want to work with. mygotodoc.com. Tell him Renz sent you. This is a guy who looks at everything. And that's what we need. There's a role for traditional medicine. There's a role for alternative medicine. There's a role for everything. But we have to, science means testing. And you've heard the good doctor talk about everything from energy to light to medicine